Hi, I'm Faye and I'm the mother of a wonderful, beautiful 3-year-old little boy called Dexter who was diagnosed with autism when he was just turned 3 years old. If you're anything like me, when you find out that your child is developing differently, maybe they are missing milestones, they're finding things difficult that seem to just come so easily to their peers. One of the first things you do is you turn to Google. You Google, what's the problem? Help me Google, tell me! And if you do that, the chances are it won't be long until you're presented with the word autism. I bet at some point you went, nah, that's not my child. That doesn't apply to our situation. Because the thing with autism is there are so many preconceived ideas around what it is. And what you think of when you think of autism depends on your own experiences of autism, all the things you've seen online, all the things you've read about. And what happens is you will immediately compare your idea of autism to the child that's in front of you. Those things probably aren't going to marry up exactly, and you're going to go, nah, this isn't our situation. So before my son was diagnosed with autism, my idea of what autism was a child who had meltdowns all the time, who couldn't be taken out in public without melting down, a child who couldn't handle bright lights or loud noises or busy environments or being touched, a child who didn't want hugs or kisses, a child who was so locked in their own world that they didn't notice what was going on around them. My view of autism, I tell you, it was so far off the mark, it's embarrassing. I knew so little about autism that I didn't even realise that a speech delay went hand in hand. I thought speech delays and autism were two completely different things. We don't want our children to struggle through life. We don't want them to face any adversity that other children aren't facing. All of those things come together and make you not want to believe it's autism. And what you want to believe heavily influences what you do believe. Anyway, because of all these things, what I would do is I would actively seek out footage of other people's autistic children, looking specifically for differences. I wanted footage, evidence to prove to me that it wasn't autism that we were dealing with something different. The problem with doing that is twofold. Firstly, it puts you in a state of constant emotional turmoil. It's like being on this cliff and you climb to the top of the cliff. Every time you think everything's going to be okay, but you are teetering on that cliff edge because deep down you know something is off. And then you'll see something that confirms what you were scared about and you'll come crashing back down. But you know, then you'll convince yourself that actually, no, that's not the case, and you'll manage to climb back up to the top. And before you know it, you go to a baby group or you go to a toddler class or you go to nursery and you see children doing what your child's not doing and you come crashing back down again. It's so difficult. And it's also a waste of time because it really stops you enjoying your child. And whatever happens and however they develop, at some point you're going to look back on their younger years and think, I wish I'd just enjoyed them. So, all that being said, anyway, I'm going to run through a list of traits that my son showed that pre-diagnosis made me think that he couldn't possibly be autistic. If you are doing what I used to do and you're watching this video just to find a child that matches the same profile as your child, and as I start running through these things, you start thinking, oh, well, you know, there's nothing like my child or the child I'm concerned about, so I'm going to click off this video. Please stick with it because I have a very important point to make at the end and I'd really like you to listen to it. Okay, so number 1, he was interactive, smiley, happy, engaging little boy. He would smile and just enjoy the interaction. But here's the thing, it was only ever on his terms. And I know all children are like this to an extent, but with Dexter it was definitely to the extreme. So we could engage him in like a familiar song, but we couldn't just call his name and get him to turn around for something else because his attention was elsewhere. And if he didn't want to give you his attention, he wouldn't give it to you. And that was probably most of the time. So although he would engage and give eye contact and be smiling and happy, it was different to typical children. I find it so much easier to get my friends' children's attention than I did my own son. Number 2, he was very, very, very loving and affectionate. And you know what? He still is. He was affectionate, but he had no social boundaries. He didn't understand personal space. He would grab you, and I think part of this was seeking sensory input. He likes to be held very tightly and squeezed, and he would like press his forehead into my forehead, which is quite common with children on the spectrum. He was like too rough, too much, too in your face, didn't understand social boundaries. I didn't mind whatsoever. He's my son, he can do it once. But, you know, it was different. Socially it was different. Maybe it wasn't exactly appropriate. And number 3, he had no huge sensory aversions to bright lights and busy environments. He was slightly sound sensitive, but not really anything noticeable. But in environments where there was a lot of sensory stuff going on, say for example like a firework display I remember taking him to, we would like lose him, as in he would just be so overwhelmed by what was going on. Excited overwhelmed though, he loved it, he was excited by it, but he would run off, or I couldn't get his attention. He was too busy taking in all of his environment. Because the thing with Dexter is he can't filter like a typical brain can. He was so busy taking in everything around him that I might as well have not been there. Number 4, he could engage in pretend play. This actually is quite unusual for a child on the spectrum, and one of the things that made me think, oh well, this is definitely not autism, because he can, you know, put a doll in a pram and wheel it around, and he can feed, you know, his little teddy bear. There is a but though. All of his play, including the bits of pretend and relational play that he was showing, were very solitary. There was no two-way element to it. It wasn't like, oh, I'll pour a cup of tea. Mummy, do you want a cup of tea? He would just play as if he was completely on his own in the room. Number 5, he had no need for routine or sameness. This is another thing that really threw me. He didn't need things to be carried out in a certain way. He was pretty laid back, easygoing, passive. But the thing about routine and sameness is it demonstrates a rigidity of thought, which means that the individual is less flexible than you would expect in the way they think. And my son did demonstrate rigidity of thought, but only in play. So when he was playing, if I interrupted his play, or if I tried to get him to do something else, he wasn't happy. He wanted to play with his toys in his way all the time, and that is rigidity of thought. Number 6, he could understand verbal language. I could give him a simple instruction. I remember at 6 months old telling him to clap his hands, just without demonstrating it, just verbally, and he would pick up on it and do it. He always had understanding of language, which is actually crazy considering at 3 he's still pretty much non-verbal. But his understanding of language was for very literal, very simple instructions and labels of things. He knew the names of so many different things, and yeah, he could follow instructions. He could follow maybe up to 2-step instructions, but the problem was back then with getting his attention. It was very hard to get his attention, to get him to actually listen to and follow the instruction. And the other thing we noticed as he got older, his understanding for basic language was still fine, but he started to struggle with the more abstract concepts that his peers were picking up on so easily. Quick example, he doesn't really understand prepositions. If you gave him something and told him to put it on the table or under the table or behind the table, he wouldn't really get it. He'd probably just put it straight on the table, whatever you said. Number 7, my son showed remarkable intelligence in some areas. How offensive is that, actually, that I thought that autistic individuals couldn't be intelligent? What an idiot I was. Of course autistic individuals can be intelligent. They in fact, they are often super intelligent. So there's something that's been termed in America, I think, twice exceptionality, which is basically when an individual is very almost gifted in one area and really at the same time really struggles in another area, and that is absolutely my son down to a T. He already at 3 can read. Oh, that's hyperlexia. I'll go into that more in a different video. His memory is exceptional. He's a very bright little boy, but at the same time, he's more or less non-verbal. He struggles with language, he struggles with social cues. And these aren't just slight difficulties, these are significant challenges for him at this moment in time. So what is my point? Well, the one thing I don't want this video to do is, if you are teetering on that cliff edge that I was speaking about before, I don't want this video to make you go crashing down. I don't want you to think, oh wow, okay, well, all the things that made me think this was going to be okay are wrong, and it's definitely not going to be okay. Because I don't want you to think about that at all. I don't want you to think of autism like that at all. What I want people to do, if they take anything from this video, is to throw out all of your preconceived ideas about what autism is. Pretty much autism just means you don't fit into any box. You don't fit neatly into any category, and at the same time you have struggles understanding social cues and communicating. It's like I'm talking to myself, because this is what I would have taught myself. Please remember that autism isn't a personality type. Autistic individuals are as different from one another as non-autistic individuals. If your child is autistic, it may be harder for you as a parent to find the key that unlocks their potential. But you are their parent. If you work hard enough, you are fueled by love for them. You will find that key. You will unlock their potential, and they will thrive if you come at it with the right attitude. And if they are armed with that knowledge about themselves and a supportive environment, you're winning. You're winning. It's going to be fine. If you want to follow our family's journey, or you want to watch more videos like this, then please subscribe to our channel, and I'll catch up with you in the next video. Thank you. See you later. Bye.